yeah, really everything was based off of that, just like getting the data in and out of the server over that connection. So and then it kind of evolved to, all right, well, how do I store this? What's the best format to just have it in memory for the program to access, and then how do I structure sending messages back, and it just all kind of snowballed from there.
Hello and welcome to the Pybites podcast, where we talk about Python, career, and mindset. We're your hosts. I'm Julian Sequeira.
And I am Bob Beldebos. If you're looking to improve your Python, your career, and learn the mindset for success, this is the podcast for you. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the Pybites podcast. This is Bob Beldebos, and I'm here with Dan Dresser. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. Yeah, just pushed out some updates to my program and ready to go.
Nice. Always be coding.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So in this episode, I wanted to have you on because you made a very cool, interesting, functional trading app, and you shared a win in the community as well 1 or 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I remember we spoke about it a year ago, and you were already keen on the performance that was needed for it. And now recently, you have refactored it into a V2 using Rust. So not only that I want to have you on to share your background. We have never had anybody talk about trading. I have a finance background, but I don't know anything about trading. Then this is all about building a big app, and then ultimately refactoring it in with an eye on performance. So I think we have a lot to talk about, but to get started, maybe you can introduce yourself to the audience. And if you have a win of the week, then you're also more than welcome to share that.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a background in computer science, so I studied economics at university and have done some various certification programs in finance. But my whole career, I've been in the financial world, and really kind of in the trading world more specifically. Obviously, the world of finance is pretty broad, but so I just naturally through the course of my career have kind of gotten involved in programming. My dad's a programmer, so that's kind of been an influence in that process too. But more so, it's just been, oh, I need to complete this task and it needs to be done faster or with automation or things like that. And that's just kind of been my natural progression. To the extent where I think I'm coding at a pretty deep level nowadays, which I really enjoy, and I kind of find that I actually like it more than some of the aspects of trading, or at least I like approaching trading from the coding standpoint. Yeah, so that's kind of my background with coding and trading, and then for a win of the week, I actually just pushed out a few kind of bigger updates to my code base. Just yesterday afternoon, I have been working on. So right now, my program stores all like the trade information in a database, and I went back and I rewrote a bunch of things, including adding another separate sub process so that I store all orders in my database, and that way I can do like now I'm going to go back to Python and write some analytics code in Python to, create a report that shows me how well I'm trading, or like how well the executions are, when I send out an order, and when does it get filled, or what price does it actually get filled at, and stuff like that. So that's my big win, but also, really the first step in a process that'll continue on.
It's a great feeling, right? When you have your app and it's serving users, and you can roll out features like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. It's nice to kind of feel like you have the ability to, oh, I know this update is most important. I'm going to go do that now.
Yep. It's here with the version 2 rewrite of the platform. It's like feature after feature, and it's very addictive.
Yes, it is.
I want to ask you about your background in training, but we could maybe go straight into the app because I think that will answer the question what kind of subfield of trading or what you're actually doing specifically in the trading space
Mhm.
and why you had that need for that app or automation. So let
Yeah.
me just ask you, you have this big trading app, maybe you can give a quick run through what it does for non-technical trading people and
Yeah.
what the use case was automated, because I guess there's an automation aspect to this, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I do a type of trading called relative value trading, and what that means is I try to make trades based off of whether I think one company or stock is going to do better relative to another company or stock. Um, so I'm not trying to say I think company XYZ is undervalued, so I'm just going to buy it and wait till I think it's properly valued. But I'm going to say, I think company ABC is cheap relative to XYZ, so I'm going to buy ABC, sell XYZ, and then hope that, ABC does outperform. Um, so it's a little bit more of a professional kind of, um, more professional trading is kind of uh, done in this kind of relative value framework. Um, and so, there's all sorts of different ways to do it and all sorts of different products that you can kind of do this with. But I just trade U.S. stocks, so stocks listed on U.S. exchanges. But I do it in kind of a faster format. So my when people talk about trading, one of the questions they usually ask is, "Oh, what's your time horizon for your trades? Are you intraday? Are you second by second, or are you weeks or months or years long? Kind of time horizon." Um, and I'd say that I am more of a intermediate, so call it a couple weeks on average is my time horizon. Um, so I'm not trying to compete with high frequency trading firms, which are, a big chunk of the market these days. But I'm also a lot faster than your typical, kind of more traditional investors. So anyways, the goal for writing this program was to be able to do that type of trading in a systematic way quickly across hundreds of securities at one time. So the way that I trade, I really couldn't do it manually just by clicking. It's just too much, too many companies to do it with, and it does require some intraday speed, mostly to uh, I don't know if this is going to be confusing or not, but there are times when I have an order out there and then calculations update, and I don't want that order to be out there anymore. So it's imperative that it gets canceled quickly, and that is something that yeah, I'm very sensitive to. So uh, that's another factor that it's just if I have orders on 200 companies, I can't cancel them all quickly enough when I need to and put newer orders out there quickly enough. It would be impossible for me to do it manually.
So this is really a skill problem, right?
Yeah.
The amount of companies, 200, makes it
Yeah.
impossible to do something manually, but you might have to do these bulk actions, right?
Yes. Yes. And my goal is to add more companies to it eventually. But yeah, I was doing it for a little bit manually with a group of like 20 companies, and that was like I just couldn't even get up from my desk during the trading day. So
Cool. And who is the audience of the app? Is that still only you, or is there a team, or is it even a product you sell? What's the audience?
yeah, so right now I'm the audience. I am working with this trading firm, but really I'm kind of my own business unit within the company. My goal is to take what I'm doing and build a team around it, and eventually maybe sell what I'm doing as a product for external investors. So I'm kind of in the early stages of that. Now that I have the trading platform up and running, it's a matter of building track record, and then hopefully we can attract investors to it, and then I can build a team around it, and we'd all be using this platform.
That's super exciting.
Yeah, it is.
And for people that look at these solutions as something really like, wow, like how do you even do that? This all stemmed from, again, automation. You were having a process that was slow or very manual, and you just thought, well, there should be a better way. There should be there should be a way that the machine can do this for me. And that really sparked this whole thing, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, everything I'm doing, that's part of the nature of it, is everything I was doing is very systematic in the first place. So it's like, very strong preset rules for when to buy, when to sell, and how much, and so on and so forth. So it's something that should have been very easy in theory to put into a machine and let it do it for me, but it did take some time to get there.
Yeah, which leads me to the next question. Like the process usually seems very simple, but there's of course a lot of detail and exception handling and whatnot. So,
Mhm.
what were some of the challenges of V1 and lessons learned by automating this process?
Yeah, so honestly, the first major challenge was just kind of wrapping my head around the difference between async and actual parallel processing across threads. So that was all new to me when not entirely new. So I had worked with a colleague at a previous company who had a computer science background, and he had written some applications really with Excel as a front end to interact with the trading platform. But he was doing it all via uh, an async event loop in Python. So that was kind of my first exposure, but I still didn't really kind of understand the nuances of it. But once I really started trying to write my own code, that was the first major hurdle of like, okay, an async event loop is, one line timeline kind of thing, and it goes back and forth between different points on that timeline depending on where it's waiting for things, as opposed to having separate timelines for threads or so that was kind of a big, just like conceptual jump for me. But once I kind of watched a lot of YouTube videos and did, little sample exercises with it, it did kind of start to sink in a little bit. So that was a hard starting point, but got there.
That's just the standard library async IO, or did you
Yeah.
use some library?
In Python, it was just a standard library
Okay,
async IO. Yeah.
yeah, cool. And
Yeah.
what else was difficult? What else? Because one thing I can imagine is like you're working with external dependencies and systems to get your
Mhm.
data and stuff. So was that maybe something challenging?
Yeah. So the nice thing about the firm that I'm working with now, they have a kind of like a Python API, quote unquote, but it's really kind of like example code for opening like a TCP connection with their server, and then sending and receiving messages back and forth essentially. Um, so I did have that example code to go off of and with the Python version when I started, which was helpful. It still took me a while to kind of really understand, all the different pieces and how they're encoding and decoding protobuf messages into byte strings and vice versa, and then putting that into a Python format. That took a little bit of time to understand how that works. But I just started small. So, my first goal was I have a one file program and it connects to the program and then just prints out any incoming messages. And that was my goal one. And kind of once I got that, it was just a matter of building off that slowly and, methodically.
Yeah, I like that because when you tackle the whole solution at once, it can be overwhelming. You might never get to it. So
Hmm.
similarly, when we did the 2.0 for a platform which is coming out, or might have already been released when this goes live, um, I mean, we have had done a platform before, but how do you start, right? And I think literally the first thing I did was just import the bytes into the database, the exercises, and get a new code editor on a page and load the
Hmm.
data and be able to submit that exercise like that. Well, that sounds like a lot, but that's actually a very specific core task, and then from there build out all the rest, right? So yeah,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
you you broke your project out into milestones or sub goals, and yeah, tackled like a
Yes.
specific core feature first, and then it became easier, right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
relatively speaking, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, everything was based off of that, just like getting the data in and out of the server over that connection. So, and then it kind of evolved to, all right, well, how do I store this? What's the best format to just have it in memory for the program to access? And then, how do I structure sending messages back? And it just, all kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, but I think in your app instance, it's you get really deep down into like async, as you mentioned, but also network programming. So that must be quite a steep learning curve, right?
It was, yeah, it was. I would have, routinely, I would be like, I'm really stuck. I don't understand this. And I'd just be sitting there staring at this block of code for like a week. And then all of a sudden it would click and I would just be off to the races until the next roadblock.
Yeah, so as Ryan Holiday says, right, the obstacle is the way, but that's nicely said, but can be very challenging, right? How did you handle that from a mindset perspective? Did you have like people you could go to, mentors, or at least, rubber duck debugging, whatever? Like when it got really tough, how did you handle the mindset? Because a lot of people, when you get challenge after challenge, there's a temptation to give up, right? Like, why am I even doing this? So there must have been a strong motivation. But yeah,
Mhm.
how was that mindset side?
Yeah, I definitely had a strong motivation. Just the goal of being able to, I had used kind of like, ad hoc or, really pieced together things to kind of accomplish trading in the past. But just knowing that all the pieces are there, and if they were combined to do it specifically how I wanted to, that it would just be, such a much better product. And then just kind of like, you know, it was while I was kind of starting to think about all of that, I was in the process of joining this new company, and just the ability to kind of, do this for myself essentially, and for, building out this new business unit, was also a lot of motivation. But it was tough. There were definitely times where I was like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get this to work, especially going from Python to Rust. But I would just take a break and go for a walk with my dog, and or get on the phone with my dad, who's been a developer for 40 plus years, and he would have some good insight. Or I did talk with a couple older colleagues, from past jobs, just getting insight on how they structured code and stuff like that. But really, all the nitty gritty was kind of, I just had to struggle through it myself.
That's awesome, being able to discuss that with your dad, and
Yeah,
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 leverage his back. But I think a lot of this is also, we often think the code and stuff, and sure, with network programming, there's complexity there, but half of it is also the domain knowledge, right? So I think as you had that experience, and the app was purely that experience, that half of it was also there, and
yeah.
you just had to translate it into code, right? Not saying it's easy, but I
Yes.
think people sometimes underestimate, or yeah, or overestimate the code or underestimate that there's actually a lot of domain knowledge involved. And when that's there, then that's a good chunk you already have, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like when I wrote the trading algorithm, for instance, both the V1 in Python and the V2, it was really just like I know exactly how it needs to operate each step of the way because I've been trading this ways for years now, and so it was really just a matter of like taking that and putting it into a logical formatting code. But that domain knowledge definitely helped a lot.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about V2. You have some sort of
Mm-hmm.
Pydantic story here, right? Like, yeah, the performance need. Let's
Yeah,
rewrite the core engine in Rust, and we'll be happy, and make
yeah,
it make it 17 times.
right, right,
So
exactly.
when became yeah, did you feel like maybe I need to do a refactor? And yeah, how did you come up with Rust? I mean, it's of course a good option for performance, but yeah. So when did you feel it was time to do a refactor or rewrite, and why did you go with Rust over maybe other options? Yeah.
Yeah, so honestly, I always kind of had in the back of my mind that it would be nice to just get a version 1 up and running with Python so that I could start trading sooner. Um, but I kind of always had in the back of my mind that it would be nice to rewrite this with like its own front end and with a more performant language. But I think what really kind of like upped the urgency level, there was a couple things that happened. One was I just noticed that there were times when, because the way I was running V1 is I had like essentially a Python program that happened like or was running in the back end, and then I could see output from it in Excel and send messages back to it from Excel. But that going in and out of Excel was pretty slow, or at least slower than I wanted it to be for active trading intraday. Um, so it took some time, but eventually I started to notice things where, oh, like it's waiting to send this message back into the trading platform, probably because it's a little bit queued up with a higher level of incoming messages or something. And there was also no and part of this too is probably just my inexperience in programming, but I had everything running on one async event loop, and I had no real separate sub processes at the time. Um, and I'm sure I could go back and rewrite my Python code now with much better structure and have it be faster. But the other major factor is there was one time I just had a update to Office 365 that got auto installed, and then like it just broke something and I just couldn't figure it out, and then I just downgraded Excel and it started working again, and then I was like, all right.
NCL.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, I just need to basically write my own GUI so that I don't have this issue, because it is important that if I'm trying to use this in production for trading and in theory build a product around it, that it has to work.
Cool. So speed, getting rid of dependencies, Excel. That was the main driver then to go with something else, right? And Rust,
Yeah.
that was that just from hearsay, seeing all the things that happening in the Python space.
Yeah, it really was. So, hearing you guys talk about it on your podcast, and also on the Talk Python podcast, just hearing all the buzz about it and just kind of being like, it sounds really interesting, like sounds really fast and but kind of different. I had never coded in like a systems programming language before. Uh, so I was just like, well, why not this? It seems like people are really interested and excited in it, so I'll just start there. My dad had programmed in C and C++, and I talked with him about that. But I think in some ways, if you're new to systems programming, that I can actually, in some ways, see Rust being easier to pick up than C. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think the borrow checker and the compiler are actually really helpful when you're learning. So just kind of hearing people talk about that was like, yeah, I'm just going to try Rust and see what happens.
But Rust, even so, Rust has a steep learning curve, right? So how did that go
Yeah,
for you?
yeah. I mean, I basically almost treated it like my full-time job for like a couple months because I knew that I needed to get something more sustainable. And so I went through the Rust book. And I also found, I know later on you like to ask about a book recommendation, but I found Free Code Camp had a 14-hour video course that they have on YouTube for learning Rust that I found to be really helpful, especially because the person who put it together would stop at some of the more difficult topics and have slides about here's what's actually going on with allocating memory on the stack versus the heap, and that visual explanation really kind of helps get through some of those more difficult topics. But basically, as soon as I'd spend a ton of time in working through the video and the Rust book and some other resources. But then pretty quickly, I also would just like start playing around with it. So I asked my company for the protobuf message files that they used for the Python API, and then I was just like, all right, well, how do I get these into Rust code? And I would just Google protobuf Rust and found various crates that do it, and so I would do a lot of learning, but also a lot of playing around, but very specific playing around. I was immediately trying to take the concepts and apply it in Rust, and it did help that I already had kind of a working version in Python to go off of too, just as a starting point.
Yeah, what we call JIT learning, right? Just in time learning is
Yes.
working backwards from the problem. You might not know anything, you feel like an imposter, but you just try to solve that problem, and then the holistic understanding comes with time. I mean, you keep
Yes.
studying and reading it, but if you only do that, then you're not going to really, it's not going to stick, right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah, but yeah, that's cool. I think it's also helpful if you have. When I did my month of Rust learning, and back in June, I need to pick it up again. But I just looked at little Python projects I had and tried to translate them into Rust, and that was really helpful because you already have a specific task, and it's more motivating, and it's scoped out and stuff. Also, yeah, then I found that there actually are a lot of good crates or packages already available. So yeah, you will write some Rust, but you will also actually reuse a lot of libraries, which might make it a bit easier.
Yes.
But then on the borrow checker, for example, did you like that whole memory management, of course, already done for you in Python? So did you find like, well, first of all, how was that experience of having to do that manually? And was that something in your app where you said like, wow, by using now doing that memory management myself, I can actually get to that performance I desired? Did you have that experience?
Yeah, I did. I was trying to do a little bit in the version 1 in Python where I did kind of get into like having a lock in on a like a dictionary, for instance, so that I could read it from Excel while it's also being updated by the async event loop in the background. So I did have a little bit of exposure to that kind of concept. Um, it got significantly more complicated moving into Rust, especially because since I'm trying to now write my own GUI, I had to think about, well, now I have like a main program or a main thread that is tied up with the GUI. So now I have to figure out how to spawn sub processes. One of those spawned sub processes needs to have its own async event loop so that I can do the TCP connection and read and write messages. And then, so there's all this like, cascade of different processes, and then how does the data get shared or sent across? So it was a big learning curve, but again, like I would just start small, and so I wrote a one thread program at first to um, essentially like connect to the server and print the messages in a terminal, so I could see all the price updates coming through from the server, and then I would say, okay, well, my first step in the GUI was, how do I just like get a window that displays, stock and price? And honestly, that took a long time to figure out how to do that. That was probably my biggest roadblock, because I had so many iterations where I was just stuck trying to figure out how to integrate the main thread with a sub process with a Tokyo async process on it. But eventually I got there, and once I kind of figured that out, it just got progressively easier as I went on.
Yeah, it's almost like the harder you bang your head on the problem, ultimately you will find it out. And once you're there on the top of the mountain, then all of a sudden you have, not only did you solve the problem, but you also realize you have learned a couple of things, and you're in a
Mhm.
good place, right? So is the
Yeah.
whole code base now in Rust, or do you have like a Rust inner core and do like PyO3 to integrate it with Python, or did you just scrap Python, start from scratch, do everything in Rust? In just 12 weeks, Pybites elevates you from Python coder to confident developer. Build real-world applications, enhance your portfolio, earn a professional certification showcasing tangible skills, and unlock career opportunities you might not even imagine right now. Apply now at pybit.ds/pdm.
So for the trading side itself, it's all in Rust. So I do have some Python code that I interact with like a data provider via API, and I just so it's like I have a separate process for getting the data from the API, storing it in my database, and then anything on the trade side is only Rust now.
Awesome. And how much faster have you benchmarked it? How much performance you've gained?
I have tried to do a little bit of benchmarking. That was a totally new concept for me, but I did. I'm trying to remember how. I don't have specific numbers. I can, it was like there were times when I'd get so many messages in the Python application that I could see it like taking like a second to like a full second or 2 or 3 seconds to like actually clear a queue of messages and then start updating again. I did at one point measure how many times I could go through so one of the things the program does in both versions is it would do calculations based off of, what the current prices are of the stocks, and how many shares I own of each, and so on. And that process itself, which is just one of the sub processes, but in Python it could run like, call it 4 or 5 times a second, and in Rust it runs like 4 or 5 times every hundredth of a second. It's just like so much. I mean, not quite that, but that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But it's just like instantaneous, and I don't have any lags now between like seeing messages coming in, and they just get processed and it can move on.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, this is not even about the numbers. This is like, in your case, this can mean like better trades, better
Mm.
decisions, right? So
Yeah.
we don't really care if it's like seconds versus milliseconds. It's all about how much can you do, how much data can you, how fast can you process it, how can fast can you make a decision, right, to do a better
Hmm.
trade. So yeah, that's super cool. So have you noticed like being able to make better trades just by because of this performance enhancement?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's made a pretty material difference in so like one of the things that I had a lot of trouble with in the Python code is that um, I have safety features in the program because it is a program that's trading real stocks, and so there's a lot of safety features built into it just from um, my experience and learning from other traders. And but one of the things that it would do is if the market is either going up really strongly in the middle of the day or going down really strongly in the day, then it would have a tendency to, all right, if the market's going up, I'm actually just selling and I'm not buying enough to keep it balanced because the market's only moving in one direction. So what I would try to do is I say, all right, well, once my net selling gets too high, it would cancel all the sell orders and just wait until it had bought to put new sell orders out again. Um, but in Python, that could take, seconds to happen. And in the meantime, the market could have moved up significantly in a matter of seconds. And I would be, you know, way too net short, as we would say, or I would have sold too much on the day. And then if the market, moves back down, then I would start buying again. And so you end up doing because you're too slow, you end up buying high and selling low in a perverse way, kind of. um, and so the Rust program is significantly faster at getting those messages back to the trading server in time. So it's almost instantaneous when I see, within like tenths of a second, I it calculates the net exposure of being too long or too short, and then it sends, that cancel request out, and all those orders that I don't want to have out there anymore get canceled, and that saves me real dollars on a daily basis. So
That's awesome. I like this story because often we say like, well, Python is fast enough, right? Like for my typical web app, for example, a coding platform, fast enough, works well. But so why learn Rust, right? Like, I just and I struggle with it, right? I don't find that performance use case to really, go very deep in it. But here you have an actual real world dollar figure thing
yeah,
where
yes,
this has
yes.
helped. So I think that's a good story to share. Yeah, cool. No, that's fascinating. So for people that want to learn Rust, you already gave a couple of tips, right? Like scratch your own niche, build something you have already the template for in Python, jet learning, as we always say as well. The Rust book is a good resource, but again, go code and figure stuff out. Any additional tips or advice for Python people wanting to get into Rust?
Yeah, I think I really liked the free code camp video course. I found it to be very helpful, especially with learning the difference between stack and heap, and how to uh, share data across threads. And then I spent a lot of time kind of googling Rust crates, and or like what does this one do, and Tokyo tutorial was really helpful. So Tokyo is the crate that I use for the async event loop, and they have a really great tutorial. So I mean, but yeah, I think the best the most effective learning I did was when I just kind of sat down and, all right, here's my Python code. How do I get it into Rust? And just going through that process was super educational. And I found that I understood my Python code more than I had in the past. And then also learned how to translate it into Rust, which was just a great education.
Cool. And you also authored and maybe are authoring a couple of exercises, right, on a Rust platform.
Yeah. I've always, I think it's the Python and the Rust community have such a great kind of like open source world, and it's a new thing to me, and to really kind of try to get more involved in that. But it's one thing that I would like to do, and so yeah, I definitely would like to. I haven't been able to recently, but I would. I'm definitely planning on writing some more Rust exercises.
Yeah, I think you have a few there. So I also
Yeah,
need to get back to the busy with the Python one, but
yeah,
I will.
right.
I will. But yeah, it's cool. Cool that we have that. And thanks for contributing. Yeah, I thought like the Bytes is a premium product, right? But the Rust one
Mm-hmm.
can be totally open, right? So you have that
Mm-hmm.
nice pull request flow going on. Seems to work
Yeah,
pretty well. So
yeah, definitely.
cool. Well, thanks for sharing. Any final words, CTA? Something you didn't mention before or haven't asked you about? You want to share?
Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah.
I don't know. I think just kind of go out there and do it. It is a steep learning curve with Rust, but it is a really cool language. I think the more I use it, the more I'm like, wow, like this is really well thought through how it's designed, and kind of once you get past that initial hump, it's like it opens up a whole new world.
Cool. And for decompressing, you say walking a dog. Any other
Yeah,
things?
walk the dog. I enjoy reading, and I also enjoy doing martial arts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Nice. I
yeah,
didn't ask you about the books because you had the Rust book, but is there another title you're reading or want to recommend? See some nice
yeah.
books in the background there. So
Yes. A lot. This is our cookbook shelf, so my wife and I enjoy cooking together.
nice.
And then, as far as Rust book goes, I am currently going through Zero to Production in Rust, which is a book by Luca Palmieri, and it basically walks through the whole process, really hands-on, which I like, of creating an email API like a newsletter for an email API, or sorry, API for an email newsletter. Um, and for me, especially, I found it to be helpful because I'm learning probably more like traditional or just like professional coding things like continuous integration pipelines, test-driven development, stuff that I've never had exposure to because I've just been in my own world.
Awesome. That's we'll link that below. That seems a useful resource. And any non-technical reading or books?
Yeah, this summer I read a book called Frostbite: How the History of Refrigeration Changed Our World, or something like that. By I forget her name. I think it's Nicola Twilley is the author. She writes for the New Yorker. Um, but it's a very fascinating read on how kind of refrigeration came about and how it's just totally revolutionized our economies and also our climate, and just kind of the benefits and the costs of it, and how people are thinking about how that changes in the future. It's a really interesting book.
Awesome. We'll note that down as well. Well, Dan, thanks for coming on. A lot of cool insights. I'm sure our audience will get a lot of value out of that. And yeah, keep up the great work. And sure, we'll see more on the Rust platform as well. And you're in the community as well. If people want to reach out,
Yeah,
I will
yeah,
link your win as well, where they can see some screenshots of the app. And yeah, amazing work, man. Thanks for
yeah.
hopping on and sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Cheers.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Pybites podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. A quick message from me and Bob before you go. To get the most out of your experience with Pybites, including learning more Python, engaging with other developers, learning about our guests, discussing these podcast episodes, and much, much more, please join our community at pybites.circle.so. The link is on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, and it's in the show notes for everyone else. When you join, make sure you introduce yourself, engage with myself and Bob, and the many other developers in the community. It's one of the greatest things you can do to expand your knowledge and reach and network as a Python developer. We'll see you in the next episode. and we will see you in the community.